When I found out I was going to be a parent, I immediately felt a lot of anxiety and worry. So I went on to BetterHelp to try to look for a therapist to help me with that.
My relationship with my family and with my boyfriend and with myself were suffering. I really needed help.
I was ruminating a lot. Really getting those thoughts out to a therapist and getting feedback was just life-changing.
Discover what BetterHelp Online Therapy can do for you. Visit BetterHelp.com today.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out at the moment, but we are happy to be joined this week once again by Maxfield and Owen Riley of Oyster Analytics. They're going to help us break down some Orioles hitting prospects in this episode. They joined us preseason, and we're happy to have them back on this episode, which is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom coffees are delicious, low sugar, brain and body fuel you need to win your day. IQ Bar's plant protein bars are the smarter snack choice with plenty of plant protein, tons of fiber, and no added sugar. IQ Mix is a zero sugar drink mix that hydrates with electrolytes, improves mood, and boosts clarity. IQ Joe is a mushroom coffee designed for mental clarity and packed with 200 milligrams of natural caffeine. Plus, it comes in 4 different flavors that will totally transform your morning routine. With over 20,000 five-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body-boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. Their ultimate sampler pack includes all 3. IQ Bar has become part of my daily routines, whether it's starting my morning with IQ Joe, grabbing an IQ Bar or IQ Mix to refuel or rehydrate after a hard workout. And right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. Text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. And just to get into our main topic tonight, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we were joined once again by Maxfield and Owen Riley. They joined us sometime back from spring training to preview the Orioles minor league season. Now that we're a couple months in, we thought we would check back in to see how they see the Orioles farm system progressing, especially on the hitting side. Maxfield, Owen, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Great to be back.
I just want to start off with this question, which is, in your model so far, who has really stood out in the Orioles farm system?
So our number one guy from the Orioles farm system right now is Aaron Estrada. And he was an interesting prospect for us. He started this season in our top 100. We really liked his potential. He was a solid hitting product at age 20 in high A and double A in 2025. This year, he's continued to be pretty successful. He's been a little bit below average from a WRC standpoint in 2026. But the key for us is that he's added power. What we want to see out of guys that are 20, 21, 22 years old, that's the point when they need to start showing power if it's really ever going to be a part of the equation. And he's hitting for more power, which is definitely something that's for sure very positive. The one downside to his season, and the reason why his WRC numbers have been low, even considering his improved contact quality, is the walk rate. It's gone down from around 10% previously to now around 5.6%. And so that's something that is a little bit concerning. And for me, though, it's all about what goes behind that walk rate. You know, if he's somebody who's chasing and swinging and missing a lot, and that's what's sparking the walk rate, that concerns me as to his ability to be a plus on base guy as he climbs up the levels. But if he's doing that just because he's a little bit too much free swinging and making too much contact, that could be something in my eyes that's a little bit more, warpable as he moves up.
That's a good point. And maybe, I don't know, don't have the behind the scenes information, but maybe it's like his ground ball rate is a little high. And if they want to improve the fly ball rate, swing a little more often so we can work on that while we're in double A. I don't know if that's something that happens, but.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with other players in other organizations where suddenly the lift rate and the home run rate together go up quite a bit. And I think with the really elite guys, you see them to be able to do that without sacrificing the discipline or the strikeout rate. I think Estrada is not one of those like super elite guys, but what is encouraging is the fact that, even though those discipline issues are there, he's still striking out less than 20% of the time at 21 AA while improving his power. So that's a really good sign. It tells you that he's not getting that power by completely changing his approach and selling out every time. He's able to do it in a way that still leads him to produce contact as well. So that's a pretty positive thing to see.
Yeah, almost Pedro Ramirez for the Cubs is like the perfect example of the type of player he potentially could be, I feel like.
Yeah, he's a guy that we've
dream scenario. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the EV gains for Pedro this offseason were crazy, right? That was the thing that has taken him over the edge. And I wouldn't be surprised, if Pedro right now probably is a top 20 prospect in all of baseball, or he's a guy that can really smash the ball consistently. I think that is where Estrada wants to get to, right? Because he is always going to struggle, the fact that he is playing second base with that positional upside. So he is confined in some extent and has to find ways to make the bat work. And I think that's why our model, even though the performance hasn't been, I think, what a lot of Orioles fans have hoped and what a lot of people were saying, hyping him up a little bit going into the season, he's adding tools in the right places. And guys that are one ingredient off, getting that walk rate back, one ingredient away from being a more complete, solid, all-around hitter, that is exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited to see him go up to AAA where we get a little more public data. But moving on to a guy that's in AAA. Coming into the year, your model was high on Creed Willems, who so far has done nothing but hit and continue to develop the bat. We won't talk about the defense. What sort of effect has that had on your projections for him?
Yeah. Well, Bob, I'm interested into your thoughts on his defense since you've probably seen more footage of him than we have. So obviously that's a question, but hitting wise, yeah, I mean, we're about in the same place that we were going into the season where he's not quite in our top 100 hitters, but he's not that far off. So basically he's a guy who we think should be taken a lot more seriously than the mainstream. I know, Max, you did a write-up on him not that long ago for one of our reports. Do you have any more specifics you want to add about Creed?
He's one of those guys that he has a lot of questions as to how effective his whole package is going to be at the highest level, right? If he's a player who is playing just first base, that's a big downside, right? He goes from a player who could maybe be a catcher to a guy who's basically just a first baseman, and that really shrinks and confines him. We saw that with Blaze Jordan and how much Blaze's bat had to get better before he made it to the show because of similar positional constraints. The other tricky thing, I think, with Willems, despite him hitting really well, is the fact that his chase rate is 34.9%, right? That's very high, and he's offsetting it right now with decent contact. But I think the question also remains at the pro level, is he going to be able to resist that particularly enticing stuff, that high level off speed that all the major league arms have? If he can do that, I think he can be a good hitter. But I think both of those things combined are the reason why he's outside of the top 100, despite putting up really solid numbers at a pretty young age.
Yeah, personally, I think defensively you're looking at pinch. If you're in a pinch, he's your third catcher option. Like, I don't know if the defense is there, but yeah, he's probably going to end up being first base DH guy. That's why we've been kind of saying he's Rule 5 eligible this offseason. If the Orioles are anywhere near being buyers at the deadline, I think he's a guy that they should look to move. But hopefully he can, continue to improve the bat enough where the first base profile won't hurt him too much.
Yeah, and it's feasible, right? I mean, he's not striking out too much. He's hits for home run power. He hits for a decent average. Even his discipline on our ratings, we've got it a little bit below average, but not too bad. So obviously that underlying chase rate is concerning, but he has been able to kind of weirdly merge all these pieces together and find a way to make it work. So, who's to say he can't do that in the major leagues as well?
Although it looks like he's going to be out for a while, unfortunately, with an undisclosed injury. Nate George had really started to heat up at the plate before going on the IL in early May at Frederick. What sort of expectations do you have for him when he's back on the field?
Yeah, so we've soured a little bit, or our model has, on Nate George over the course of the season. And it's difficult to know how much of that might have to do with, maybe this injury or issue, whatever it is, was giving him lately. But that was also his hottest time. So maybe that's not really what's going on. Thing about him is he's kind of regressed where we hoped he would progress so far this year, which was mainly the power department, right? So we were really hoping that he would take that really good hit tool that he has and add a little bit of home run power to that, which it looked like maybe he would after he did hit some decent extra base hit, non-home run extra base hit power last year. But he's regressed in that department pretty significantly. So last year in 87 games, 14 doubles, 9 triples. So far this year in 20 games, small sample obviously, but he's hit 3 doubles and no triples, right? That's a really sharp decline, and the home run power hasn't compensated for that at all. So as we're seeing prospects progress, what our model is expecting, and why it rated George reasonably high to begin the year, is that on this development curve, one of the things that tends to come most reliably is just a bit more power as guys get older and they get stronger. And to not see that with George is a little bit concerning, and I think is why our opinion of him has been dampened a little bit. But he's a plus glove in center field. That gives him a really good floor. I think, we talked at the beginning of the season about him being a high floor and, mid ceiling type of guy. I think what we've seen this year is that we're not really reevaluating that floor, but we're thinking maybe it's more likely that the floor closer to the floor is where he really winds up rather than reaching some sort of higher ceiling.
And I think another tricky thing, with George is just he's producing just so many balls that are on the ground or line drives, right? To get doubles and home runs, you have to put the ball in the air. And his fly ball rate this season is 18.5%. It's incredibly low, right? That's a profile that is almost certainly going to lead to exclusively singles production. He has 30.8% line drives, which is, again, fantastic from an average standpoint. But I think that's a battle that he's going to have to continue to wage, is just being able to get that ball elevated enough to be able to hit the ball hard. Like his home run fly ball rate is 8.3%, which is not, typically guys who are hitting this many singles, oftentimes they have non-existent power. He has some power there, right? It's there. He just needs to find more ways to tap into it. And he's just turned 20 too. So, right, that's another element, is that he has a pretty long runway to be able to figure things out, especially considering how good of an athlete he is. I think he has maybe a better shot than the average player in his situation to be able to make that jump.
Yeah, and the model still gives him a 24% chance, so that's not, he's still got a reasonable shot. Sorry, Bob.
No, I was just say it's really unfortunate that I think it's an illness. It's whether it's mono or bubonic plague, whatever. It's keeping him out for a long time, and it's unfortunate. I'm curious how much strength he'll even be at full strength when he comes back. It's unfortunate, but hopefully he can bounce back. And kind of a guy who's looking like this year's version of Nate George, Jaden LeRae. This question kind of is referring to him. If a player starts out their season in short season, like LeRae and FCL, without much publicly available data from their high school or college careers, how long does it take for the model to start projecting their potential?
Yeah, so, quick answer for our model is we won't give an opinion in the model on anybody until they have 150 pro plate appearances. So, but even once they cross that threshold, when you're talking about guys, whether they be in the DSL or in the complex, 150 plate appearances in the complex still isn't really going to tell you that much. We've done some work to understand how sticky tools are and also how predictive different tools can be of future success. And when you're down on those levels, unless you're completely setting the world on fire as an over-leveled player, so say you're 17 in the complex, or you're doing Jesus Madej things in the DSL at 17, maybe those are indications for the future, but those are extreme circumstances. And most of the time, I don't know, Max, maybe you have a different opinion, but I think we see guys who sometimes skyrocket our model a little bit when they hit that 150 plate appearance threshold, but we have our confidence meter on there super low for them because of just how volatile those stats can be down there and how non-translatable they can be to full season ball sometimes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think we are more forgiving than a lot of outlets on there in terms of risk, where we do interpret that we do show that risk in the way that we model people, right? If someone's tearing it up at the DSL level, there is risk there because it is at such a low level. And so it makes it harder for them to move up the model. But if our model thinks that somebody deserves to be top 30 based on that small sample size, we will put them there. Low Ray is a guy who I think will enter the model at a pretty high level, right? The crazy thing so far, right? He tore it up in the complex. He started pretty old at 19, right? So that's older than a lot of guys who start at that complex level, but he just looked good, hitting for high average, not a lot of power, not striking out, overall solid contact package. Since he's gone up to A-ball, again, the walk rate through the roof. He's continuing to make good contact. The thing that I think will have our model particularly excited, two things. One, the fly ball rate and the line drive rate, very, very high, right? He's launching the ball. He's not pulling it yet. He's still struggling to pull, but he's getting it in the air. And his contact rates have been unbelievable. 90.9% as a 19-year-old in single A. That when Owen speaks, right, is saying, we only put guys up there who show elite contact metrics at a young age. Jaden Luray has that. I don't know if he'll crack the top 100, but I feel pretty confident in saying once he gets the, 30 more at bats that he needs, he will be in the top 250.
DJ Layton has had a nice bounce back year so far. And while the numbers, you can look at them, pick them apart, the strikeout rate certainly being a little bit high, it has been still a pretty good step forward from what he did in the FCL a year ago. What does your model see for him?
Yeah, I mean, the problem for him from us is that strikeout rate, like you say. I think when you're striking out at nearly a 30% clip in single A, he's only 19, so we'll give him a bit of a pass on that. But that's going to keep him outside our truly top territory. We've got him, not completely in no man's land. He's about like in the 200s for us overall, which, is not terrible. It means he's still got a real shot. But he's not a guy that I'm personally super high on either, especially because a lot of his he's got a 131 WRC plus this year, but a lot of that's coming from an on-base ability that's coming from a super high walk rate, which down in single A, you can put any of us four down there, and if we just kind of stand there, we'll also get a decent walk rate. Not to say that maybe there's not some seriously good discipline within there, but we just don't know for sure if that's exactly what's going on yet. And there's nothing else that's a super standout tool that has me too excited. I don't know, Max, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
In a lot of ways, he's kind of the anti-Luray. He's the complete opposite player, right? He's a player who's showing some power, showing some pop at the lowest levels, but is striking out a ton. The thing that really concerns me is when you look at a 63.6% contact rate in, a satisfactory amount of plate appearances in single A, that's a guy that is almost certainly never going to have even average bat to ball skills. The amount of power that you need to make that all work is massive. And so for us, that's where we have a little bit of pause, right? Where if he had that level of power that would make us enthusiastic, that would be a good thing. But exactly like Owen said, right? A lot of his current value is coming from that sky high walk rate. And that's something that is tricky for us to get on board with, especially at this low of a level.
Can I ask you guys a question about him as well, which is I'm just looking at his fielding logs now, and he's playing a lot more shortstop and center field than he was the prior year, which is kind of like the opposite direction that these things usually go. I mean, it's just kind of strange to see a guy get those increase. Like they seem to have taken him off second base a bit more, moved him to shortstop, moved him to center field. Is he a really good athlete out there in the field from what you've seen? Also, I know I'm ambushing you with this, so if you haven't watched him,
He is a good athlete. One thing that I think has played out in the lower levels of the farm system this year for the Orioles is that they have a lot of guys that were originally signed as shortstops, but that aren't going to stick in the position long term. So they're trying to figure out where to fit them in. So Elvin Garcia is one, DJ Layton, Joshua Lorenzo, Jaden Luray. So there's a lot of guys that fit that mold. They're trying to move around a little bit, but out of that group, I think Layton has the closest athletic profile to a center fielder. So trying it out, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stick there, but they're definitely in a point where they want to experiment with it.
Yeah. So that helps his value, obviously, but I think the hitting for us is not quite there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's definitely raw. Like he needs to refine the defensive skills, but athleticism is there to play up the middle. I know Baseball America, I believe it was, just had something out on him about how he hits the ball as hard and consistently as hard as anyone in the system. So he's a guy we're monitoring, but yeah, you got to see that the strikeout rate start to trend down. I feel like once he's nearing his 20-year-old season. But let's see. Next question I have is not in my chat anymore because I got disconnected. I believe it was, are there any trends overall in your guys' model about the Orioles farm system that we should be keeping an eye on or expecting moving forward?
One thing that we talked about pre-podcast that's interesting is just, the trajectory of the farm system as a lot of the players have come up, right? The Orioles were one of the best farm systems before, and now they've slowly gone down because those guys have come back up, right? And they don't necessarily have, the Dodgers capital to make those kinds of trades where you can kind of scatter it around and get more prospects. I think the thing for them is going to be trying to figure out, ways to keep, figuring out when to cash in on prospects and when not to, right? Because one thing that we talk about a lot is if you look at our rankings, when you get to around rank 60 for us, that's when you have a 50-50 chance to be a regular in the show, right? So almost half of our top 100 is going to fail to really be a meaningful major league contributor. So that's something that I think is very tricky, right? Where prospects offer that sky high potential where if someone really works out, you get them for this incredibly cheap value for a very long time. But I think the Orioles have found it a little bit difficult, to get it all to come together, right? That's the tricky thing is they haven't relied a lot on free agency. And so I think going forward, that's something we're going to see from the Orioles. How can they get the prospects, in the spots that they need them with a team that's already pretty young, while also cashing in on the right kinds of free agents, right? We saw it with Shane Baz this offseason where they said, okay, we're going to ship off some prospects to get starting pitching, which is coming at a cost in free agency that maybe we can't afford. So I think it's going to be a juggling game that the Orioles are going to have to play with. And I think that's, from a front office perspective, the strategy they're going to have to take.
Yeah, I'm guessing with Wahiwa Aloy and Ike Irish, the two top picks from last year's draft, basically you want to see what they do in Double-A once they get there. I'm sure it's going to be very soon before you can really make any meaningful adjustments.
Yeah, we talked. I think we talked about Aloy when we came on over the winter or in spring training, whenever it was, and we kind of were hoping that he'd knock that strikeout rate down a little bit this year. He hasn't done that yet. It's not in complete red flag territory, but at 22 in high A, you're right, Bob. Like basically we need to see him playing against better competition for that upside to show up in the model, because right now he's just, he's having a fine time of it in high A, but we don't know how much to make of that given he's not super over leveled down there. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in Double-A. I mean, clearly the power is legit, and it's just a question of, can the bat to ball skills get there to make him a well-rounded hitter.
I also want to interject really quickly with one guy who we liked back in the day and ye old model. Orioles signed him this offseason, Peyton Eales. Right, he is going off in AAA, man. 149 WRC plus, still has absolutely no power, high walk rate, only one home run. But I just, this profile of player, I think is consistently underrated. Right, you look at the walk rate and that's going to drop when he hits the bigs. Right. But if you can hit with this level of contact ability, you can make it work. I mean, we saw Chase Mydroth, right? He's the prime example of this. There were some people that were really high on him. Some said, the walk rate's going to crater. He's going to be not a good player. He's playing a quality infield. He's hitting around average, and he's a good player, right? I think that Peyton Eales has that sleeper potential to be that guy. And I know he had a bad last season, and I know he's really old for the level, but given his unorthodox path, he's a guy that I think, the Orioles can succeed with. And I think that's indicative of what they're trying to do in the system, right? They're finding these guys that have that little bit of upside to be your AAA free agents. I think he's one that can make an impact.
Yeah, I agree. Just wish he could stay healthy this year. When he's been on the field, he's been fantastic. And I actually predicted he would get that last bench spot out of spring training, but he missed most of spring training and went to Jeremiah Jackson. So good shout.
And we'll now head to our final segment, Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridley Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And if you don't have tickets to a home game or the Orioles are out of town, head over to Checker Spot anyways and watch the game there on TV. There's plenty of good food and drink to go along with that. Plus, Checker Spot is open 7 days a week. Be sure to head over to their website or their social media to learn more about Checker Spot Brewing, located 1421 Ridley Street in South Baltimore. And for our last call question, we want to talk about a guy that has stood out, at least in terms of his power this year, and that's Victor Figueroa, putting up good power numbers at Frederick. Granted, it is a hitter-friendly ballpark, but we knew coming into this year that the power tool had some promise. At the same time, though, there are some clear question marks in Figueroa's game, in particular strikeouts, and questions about whether or not the contact rate is going to play at a higher level. So how do the two of you feel about Figueroa as things stand right now?
I think, it's a tough road for him. We have him in our 200s overall, so that means that he's not, he's got a shot, right? He's kind of a lottery ticket when most guys aren't even lottery tickets, so that does have some value. Concerning, though, he's got a 57.6% contact rate this year. I mean, that's really, really low. So I have him in lottery ticket territory, 33% strikeout rate. It's really not what you want to see from a 22-year-old in high A. It's backed up by underlying contact rate that's probably even worse than that. The power's legit, though, so, he's not somebody who I'd just release and completely forget about. But it is a long shot.
I think he's, in a way, we talked about contrast earlier. I think he is the anti-Peyton Neals, right? He's a guy who sells out for power, also has a very unorthodox, deep path, only entering the system at age 21 after, playing at Florida Southwestern State College, deep round pick. I am a little more intrigued just because of the scale of the power, right? The power is really something. And I think that the interesting thing for me will come, he's going to get promoted to Double A eventually, and he's going to have to find a point where he has to make more contact or it's not going to work, right? And I'm curious to see if he can do that, because right now he's not necessarily incentivized to make big strides in that contact department, right? He's hitting the ball hard, he's elevating it. And for a guy that's doing all the power things right and checking those boxes, even though it is unlikely that somebody can find that bat to ball, I am a little bit more intrigued. He doesn't have a lot of positives to his game outside of the bat. He's first baseman only, probably not going to add much, if any, running value. But yeah, I think it's an interesting lottery pick. And we talk about his odds in our model around 10% to be irregular. So, 1 in 10 of these guys makes it. And usually I'm more excited about guys that have those standout traits who have that 10% chance. Because if they make it click, it could happen.
Yeah, it's swing from your heels. Unfortunately, that's one of the hardest skills I feel like to learn and develop is the hit tool to improve the swing and miss on pitches in the zone. We've seen it with Vance Honeycutt. He had a great spring training, but I don't know if that's going to work out. At least offensively, maybe he ends up in the majors as like a fifth outfielder defensively. But yeah, it's always a good. We're very we're more optimistic because we're talking about kids who are just trying to live their dreams, and we're trying to see the best case scenarios. But it's like it's nice to have these like 10%. That's pretty good odds. I mean, I would take this, but it puts it in perspective. I feel like.
Yeah, and I mean the upside here is a really fun to watch major league player who is 6'5", 240 pounds, and swings for the fences and hits moonshot home runs. So we can all hope that happens.
I think it's a great place to wrap up. Thank you, Max and Owen. And before you go, can you just let our listeners know where they can find you and what you're working on this season?
If they can't afford,
best place to find.
Sorry, I was just going to make a joke. If they can't afford IQ Bar, where should they go to listen and make themselves smarter?
They should go to the Down on the Farm Substack. We've been writing tons of content there. We made some big enhancements in the off season for our paid subscribers with daily prospect emails that let you know who's hot this week, who's hot today. as well as, continuing to work on our research articles, pieces like that. I know last one that was really interesting for me anyway, Owen did a really cool work on, swing decisions, looking at the players at the lower level to see guys that were good before promotion and then got promoted and fell back a little bit. And he took a look at their swing decisions and, found some interesting stuff related to that. So Down on the Farm Substack is where you can go. Keep following our work, stay on track with the minor league prospects, and learn a little bit about baseball along the way.
It's a great outlet for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for joining us. We will be back next week. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to patreon.com and sign to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 and a whole lot more. For Bob, Phil, and Nick Stevens and Zach Spedden, you've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.